Welcome, everyone. Appreciate you all joining in for our first Fireside Chat. And as many of you know that have attended our day at the State House in the past, like so many other things, we've got to do a different format. So this year we're changing this format, and hopefully not only will you be able to participate, but also we'll be able to touch with those that haven't been able to participate in the past. You know, we've all seen a lot of changes the last year, challenges the last year, but it hasn't affected just agriculture. It's affected everyone from all walks of life. But as we go forward, we know there's a lot of opportunities ahead of us. So good afternoon. I'm Rich Feltz, and many of you know me, but I am president of Kansas Farm Bureau. And with us today on this first program, we've got the Honorable Laura Kelly and also the Secretary of Agriculture, Mike Bean. Those that are joining have the opportunity to ask questions if you choose. So throughout their presentations, if you would like to kind of jot a question down, we will receive those and get those passed on. So, but before we go any farther, I would like to introduce the Honorable Governor of the state of Kansas, Laura Kelly.
Okay, well, thank you very, very much, Rich. It is really exciting to be here at the first virtual fireside chat. You know, I just conveniently have a fireplace right here. And so right behind me, warming me up significantly. It's good to be with you. It's good to be with everyone else who is able to join us today. But before I go any further, I do need to congratulate you, Rich, and the entire Farm Bureau for your New Horizon Award that you were given, recognizing the health plan that Farm Bureau put together. You know, you're being recognized from the national level. So it makes clear that Kansans aren't the only ones who know what a great job you've been doing for farmers and ranchers across the state for the last over 100 years. So thanks to you and congratulations to Farm Bureau. And you know, as we go forward, Rich, I really do look forward to building on this partnership that I feel like we have developed over these past 2 years. We've been able to do a lot of things that I think have been incredibly beneficial for our agricultural community, our agricultural workers, but our state as a whole. And I want to just continue and build on that as we go forward. Because as you said, this has been an incredibly difficult year. What's been heartwarming about it, though, is the number of Kansans who have really stepped up and stepped in to work with their neighbors, their friends, us, to get us through this pandemic and on the road to recovery of our health and recovery of our economy. So, you know, I think just, you know, I look at Secretary Beam there and I think about what he and folks in his agency have had to add on to their work schedule to help us get through this pandemic. We have folks over at the Kansas Department of Health and Environment who have been working around the clock now for over 10 months dealing with this pandemic and all the fallout from it. We've got people over at Emergency Management Department. We've got people at Department of Children and Families, Department of Commerce, everywhere. Folks across the state have stepped up. We've seen it with our frontline healthcare workers, you know, who've been, again, working around the clock, double shifts, 7 days a week to take care of the influx of patients that we've seen due to COVID. Our teachers, you know, our teachers, bless their hearts, are, you know, really pulling double duty at this point. They are trying to teach our kids at the same time having to, in many cases, take care of their own kids in their own home. But, you know, behind all of that, though, one group that has been just, you know, nose to the grindstone since the very beginning of this has been our agricultural industry and the workers there. And I particularly would like to give a shout out to our meatpacking plant workers who, you know, were hit hard at the very beginning of this pandemic. but stuck with it. We brought the Centers for Disease Control SWAT team into southwestern Kansas early on in this pandemic. They were able to work with your people and with the local health officials and the businesses to really set up environments that made it safe for people to continue to work there, so that we could continue the production and we could keep the food supply chain humming. So I want to thank all of them for what they've done. Without them, we wouldn't be feeding Kansans, we wouldn't be feeding Americans, and we wouldn't be feeding people across the world. So I really do thank them very, very much for what they've done. And with that, I want them to know and you to know that we've just moved into phase 2 of the vaccine distribution plan. In phase 2, the first phase was just frontline healthcare workers and essentially nursing home residents and staff. But we've now moved into phase 2, which will allow us to start vaccinating folks in different categories. And agricultural workers and high critical sites will be eligible throughout this phase 2 to get those vaccines, which will further protect them and those around them from this virus. And honestly is the only way that we're ever going to get back to any semblance of normal. I know I want to get to questions, so let me just quickly say, I know broadband is a huge issue to folks in your organization. I think when you look at our administration, you can see that even before the pandemic, we were committed to really making broadband more widely accessible and stronger all across the state. We built it in to the transportation program. It's the first time state general fund monies have been specifically directed towards broadband. We've created a standalone Office of Broadband Development to ensure that we never take our eyes off the goal. When we got the CARES money, we apportioned part of that, $60 million of that, to do sort of the shovel-ready broadband projects that were out there. Those are in process. We've included it in our 2022 budget. So our commitment to it is very, very strong. When I was doing the budget, there were things I wanted to ensure that we were able to fund, and had everything to do with infrastructure, the kinds of things that keep our state strong and allow us to develop economically in all industries. And so broadband was an important part of that now and going forward. I see it just as important as funding our roads, funding our schools, and funding technology. So I will be there for that. With that, I think just like you and all your folks to know that we did submit a budget to the legislature the other day. They've already been taking some pot shots at it, but I want to reassure you that it is a fiscally sound budget that funds our core services, the things that we need to do on a day in and day out basis, but also the things that will allow us to attract new business and keep a workforce strong here in the state of Kansas. So with that, I'm going to pass it on back to you, Rich, for the rest of the program.
Thank you, Governor, and also want to thank you for acknowledging us and receiving that Horizon Award at American Farm Bureau level. And as you noted, it was for our healthcare efforts. And I think we all know that we may not always agree on all the particulars of how we do some issues. We all know that healthcare is so critical to all of our citizenship, and we can take different approaches as to how we can satisfy some of the needs of our constituents. So thanks again, Governor. We'll get back to you. But in the meantime, anyone that has any questions for the governor, if you'd please go ahead and submit them, and we'll get to them here just a little bit later. But at this time, I would like to introduce our Secretary of Agriculture for the state of Kansas, Mike Beam. And to many of you, I know that he's a recognizable face for his many years that he's worked within the ag sector. But with that, Mike, I'd like to turn it over to you and to visit with those that we have online today.
Well, thank you so much. It is a privilege and an honor to visit with all of you this afternoon. And I'll try to be pretty brief and concise so that we can get into responding to questions. Typically, this time of year, I have the opportunity to go visit with a lot of groups. And when I do, I usually like to emphasize the significance of Kansas agriculture. I think sometimes we're so close to it, we don't realize how important it is for this state and the nation. But our economist has worked through the years analyzing 71 sectors of ag. You know, the state has over 530 sectors, and 71 of them are considered ag, food, and food processing. But those 71, contribute over $50 billion to the economy. There's an indirect contribution of considerably more. And in those 71 sectors, it's 13% of the workforce. So it is significant. But what inspires me and what I like or love about agriculture is that it is still predominantly family-owned businesses. The last census of ag indicated that over 84% of Kansas farms and ranches are still family-owned. So that's a very somewhat unique and fun part of the role that I play. But we're also a pretty significant nationwide. We're number 5 in the value of total ag production, according to the 2017 ag census. So we're right behind California, Texas, Iowa, Nebraska, and then Kansas. So I am humbled to be able to serve as the Secretary of Ag in a state where ag is such a big player. Now, you've mentioned repeatedly, and we all know how challenging 2020 has been. You look back at the start of the year, I think a lot of folks were discouraged and surprised that we didn't see a buoyancy in our prices because of expectations of some trade agreements. And then, of course, the pandemic really hammered the market prices, and especially the livestock sectors and the grain to some extent, because ethanol demand was down considerably. So that had the ripple effect for many producers. And then we, of course, went through the spring there with a lot of livestock producers, particularly beef cattle and swine, under a very stressful situation about would they have a place to go. And I applaud Governor Kelly. Everything she said was previously is probably minimized in the value and the impact and the appreciation that folks in the ag industry share, because it was a very significant priority amongst a lot of priorities to deal with during the pandemic. Our animal health folks were probably as busy as ever because, number one, they were preparing for if we had to depopulate, particularly swine, had a plan in place. Other states were doing it, but fortunately, we didn't get to that, but it took a lot of preparation. But what a lot of folks don't know is we had a pretty significant amount of foreign animal disease called vesicular stomatitis. It's not a deadly disease, but it's contagious and causes lots of problems, quarantines. But our animal health crew was out, I think, with over 270 visits and monitoring over 100 quarantines. So it took a big chunk of time and attention. And then, of course, we looked towards the last part of the year. It was marvelous harvest weather, but the beginning of what we hope is a short-term drought. And I think it can reflect, we started in 2019 accessing resources that are out there for folks to address the whole mental health stress. And we put up a website. We didn't create any new information, but we tried to help identify links and services that were available for folks. And we got the numbers. 2020, we had over 2,500 visits on that website. But what I think is significant is there were over 1,800 unique visitors, and the average time spent was over 18 minutes. So to average 18 minutes, you know that there were people that may be on for few minutes, and some were on there considerably. So we know that the stress is real, and we hope that website is helpful. And I know you at Farm Bureau have made that available, and we welcome any additional suggestions or on how we can improve that and maybe help in that area. But boy, there's been some positive things that I like to talk about. Governor Kelly's administration put a big priority on how to administer the CARES funding, and 12 million was devoted to securing local food grants, and that was quite rewarding. And our staff helped manage those cases. There were over 250 recipients in 80 counties, and those grants were significant. They went to the small meat processors, food processors, food banks, local direct-to-consumer producers, and these are grants that would not have been possible without the federal funds that were appropriated for that. So it's going to really up the capacity for our smaller meat processing plants. It's adding cold storage. It's helped churches in their food pantries. It's provided some resources for existing and new specialty crop direct-to-consumer farmers to give them the tools to expand and fulfill that need. And then, of course, food banks, pantries, and lots of small grocery stores. And I won't mention anything more about broadband, but I appreciate the governor's and other cabinet secretaries' commitment to that, because that is a big game changer, not just as we go through the pandemic, but long term, how we can thrive and survive in this state. And then we did have our annual Growth Summit virtual, of course, this year. And the good news is that we were able to engage many more people than we've had in the past, and had some good input on how we might move forward. And the last thing I would say is nothing probably new at all to your listeners, but the other positive things is that, of course, the market has rallied considerably. With net farm income, we looked there early fall, and it was projected to be very dismal. And I know largely due to federal aid, but on the average nationwide, we're going to be up to the point probably highest since 2013. Now, there's some disclaimers there that that's average, and Kansas relies over 50% of the gross receipts come from livestock, so we probably will be a little less than average in this state. But it's a positive way to end and look forward in 2021. So I want to close by saying that I mentioned how significant ag is, but that's because there are folks like you, each of you, and the previous generations that have taken the risks and put in the sweat equity and had the diligence to keep moving forward. It's because of you that's made Kansas agriculture, and I appreciate that. But what I also appreciate is my knowledge or experience in these rural communities is it's largely, in many cases, the farmers and ranchers who are serving in various leadership roles at the local level. Be township boards, county commissions, school boards, church councils. The list goes on, and gosh, I can't think of any more time than now that we need that leadership to continue to step up. And I want to congratulate Kansas Farm Bureau members, because I know that you're all very active and supportive at that local level. So with that, Rich, I'll stop and help if I can in response to any questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Secretary. Appreciate those comments. And here again, if anyone has any questions, go ahead and get those submitted. But I'm going to start out here with the first question for the governor, and kind of a comment question. And Governor, we have always appreciate the opportunity to come over and visit with you, and as we did in December, and we expressed then that our thankfulness for you supporting USMCA and how much it does mean for agriculture across the country, but particularly here in Kansas. But now as we go in and we have a new administration working with our federal government, and you being a Democratic governor here in the Midwest, do you see having a role that can be helpful as we address some of these issues that may want to be changed a little more radically by some than others? What you see as your role, though, in representing us with that administration?
Well, Rich, I think you are right. You know, the fact that I am, I think, the only Democrat governor in a Midwestern state, I think will amplify my voice with the new administration. And I have every intention of using that. You know, I think you've seen, you know, in my work with the last administration that, you know, I think it is my job to carry forth the issues and concerns that impact the state of Kansas, and in our case here, particularly agriculture. So just like I did with the USMCA, you know, I will listen, I will hear, and I will carry forth the messages that are in the best interests of Kansans, and push for passage of those or implementation of those at the federal level. So, you know, I happen to know Secretary of Ag Vilsack. I spent some time with him several years ago. I plan to use that relationship. I also know the Secretary of Commerce, Gina Raimondo, and you know, she's already told me I have a friend in that office. So trust that I will use those relationships, and I will use them to promote the best interests of all Kansans, including maybe most especially ag. You know, and I also recognize that I also have partners in Congress that I can work with. You know, Senator Moran is a big supporter of all things ag, and you know, I know we lost Senator Roberts, but Senator Moran is also very engaged and involved, and I will continue to work with him and the rest of the congressional delegation to put forth Kansas's interests.
Thank you for that response, Governor. In your State of the State message, one thing you mentioned about was a framework for growth in the state of Kansas. And we have a question here, kind of along that lines here, is as we see technology emerging and agricultural technology is going along with that as well, how do you see that impacting the state, and how it might be involved in creating more jobs and rural community, not just jobs, but how it might affect our rural communities as well?
Well, I think the reality of technology coming into all sectors is there, and I think it's something that we have to recognize, something we ought to capture, something we ought to build on. It will create new jobs, but they will be very different than the jobs that some people currently have. So I think it's important that we recognize this change is coming, and that we invest significantly in workforce training and retraining. And so I'll be working with our various agencies who are involved with that, and our local partners who are involved with that, our tech schools, and ensure that we have a very nimble, you know, retrofitting, retro tooling, retro training folks who may have their current jobs displaced by technology. You know, on the flip side, you know, we're also working very hard through the Department of Commerce to attract and grow industry here, and bioscience industry, which is a lot of technology is included in that. And so we're looking to recruit not only the businesses, but also that level of workforce, make Kansas an attractive place for young, smart, technologically savvy folks to come. And you know, through our Office of Rural Prosperity, we are working with our local communities to give them the tools that they need to be able to market themselves as a great place to live, a great place to work, a great place to raise your family. So we've got sort of a multi-pronged approach going to deal with the sort of the surge in technology that we expect to infiltrate almost every industry. And we recognize it's there. We're working with our educational institutions to adjust some of their offerings so that it will meet the needs of today and tomorrow.
Thank you, Governor. Secretary Beam, if along that ag technology area and how you see it can impact us in agriculture and the opportunities for growth, but let's not just limit it to ag, is what do you see the overall growth, not just from technology, but the overall growth potential for agribusiness and agriculture in the state of Kansas?
Well, I think because of our location in the central part of the United States and our really what I think are rich natural resources, which is the root of all of ag, with our soil, sun, and water. But we're going to be always poised if there's any kind of processing or value added industry, because we're very diverse in our grain producing ability. We've got a robust livestock sector, and we continue to rank. Gosh, and I didn't go into this, but we rank in the top 15 in states in about any commodity you want to kind of mention. So I think the real growth opportunity, and perhaps I like to think of it as increased profitability potential, because if we have increased market and have a basis in our state where it's a premium for our producers because of a really well thought out strategic transportation system, with the technology that's brought by broadband, that, and more importantly, and as an example, the enhanced amount of participation of farmers selling direct, that's not going to make a really large impact, but it certainly is providing and will provide opportunities for families to perhaps bring back youth that have left or keep youth after they've went through their education. And if we can keep and bring back, gradually these multi-generations back into the communities, that tends to have a kind of a ripple effect in the economic growth and the quality of life. So I think making sure we're on the cutting edge of attracting the value added processing and getting that transportation system in place. And we're collaborating now with Department of Transportation and Department of Commerce on what are game changers that will make Kansas agriculture more profitable and sustain it.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Go back to you, Governor, and we've already mentioned COVID, but we also know the impact that it's making on all of us, has and still continues and will here in the future. But the question here is that we've had presented to us is the access to vaccinations, but also the question that we keep having kicked around is liability. So could you address those issues for us, please?
Well, in terms of access, I recognize that is an issue. It is an issue all across the country. As a matter of fact, it's an issue all across the world. There just has not been enough robust production of the vaccines to meet the demands, particularly as Kansas and other states move into phase 2, which encompasses a huge group of people. Remember, anybody age 65 and older, regardless of health conditions, is now eligible for vaccine, along with our critical workers and our teachers and all sorts of other folks who fall into that category. And that's the same across the nation. So we have far more people eligible now for vaccinations than we have vaccines. I was heartened to hear the president talk about implementing the Defense Production Act to ratchet up the production of vaccinations and other virus-related equipment and testing and all of the kinds of things we need to have done. That's what should have been happening from the very beginning. It would have been very helpful, if the federal government would have taken a much more robust and centralized approach to this, so that we could have gotten these things, sooner. I mean, the vaccine itself was developed very quickly, but the manufacture of it is not keeping up. So we're working with feds now, and I know that they are working to increase those. What we do when we do get doses within the state is they come in two ways. For a while with the long-term care facilities or nursing facilities, most of those vaccines are coming in through either Walgreens or CVS. They have a national pharmacy partnership where most of the nursing homes have partnered with them, and so that's sort of a direct relationship. On the other hand, we have vaccines that are coming into the state, and we are getting those and immediately dispersing them out to the counties, primarily our local health departments, but at the beginning to some of our hospitals, because we were needing to get the healthcare workers vaccinated. Now those will be going primarily to local health departments or FQHCs, and then from there, they will make sure that the providers in their areas have those vaccines. So we will get them out just as fast as we receive them from Washington. So, that's the hang up right now, is really the distribution from DC. We have in place a pretty robust provider network, which we're building onto every day. We have just rolled out a vaccination dashboard at kansasvaccine.gov. Folks can go on there. By next week, they'll be able to go on there and sort of figure out where the closest provider is to them who can provide that vaccination and be able to get in touch and get scheduled. So we're up and we're running, and we're doing what we can. Our biggest hang up right now is just getting the doses in from the federal government. You asked me about liability. I'm not sure exactly what liability you're thinking about. Maybe if you could explain that just a little bit more.
Yes, and that just came in, Governor, but liability and liability waivers.
Okay, so are you just talking about general, if somebody gets COVID in a business, are they held liable?
Yes.
Yeah. I think, what we have seen with our current liability protections is that that's just not happening. I mean, the only way a business would be held responsible is if somebody sued them, and that's just not happening. I think a lot of that's not happening because our business world really stepped up. The variety of industries really came together early on. When I think about the personal services industry, your barber, your hairstylist, the nail salons, they all put in place incredible safety protocols, and we have had absolutely no outbreaks there. I would say the same thing with restaurants and hospitality. I know it's been really hard for them because in store dining has been a bit of a problem, but instead they've figured out other ways with curbside and just pickup and delivery. They've been able to do it. So I think our businesses have just very smartly designed their operations so that there will be nobody will sue them because they've done what they've needed to do, and I think they should rest assured that I don't think there are a lot of people out there looking to sue them. I think that people generally are very pleased with the way our businesses have handled this entire thing and the protections that they put in place, both for their employees and for the public.
Thank you, Governor. Another question that we've had come in here is kind of addressing rural services in our remote areas. And as a result of that, it creates a smaller tax base for those areas. What is the future of those smaller rural areas? I know that's kind of a difficult question, but I think it's reality in a lot of the places across our state.
Well, I'm not going to pretend that there aren't, some very esoteric struggles that some of our most remote areas will have. I think that's one of the reasons that I was so enthusiastic about setting up our Office of Rural Prosperity, bringing back our Main Street program, actually growing that, because I wanted since day one for my administration to be partners with our local communities to provide the technical assistance and, if possible, the funding that they need to really figure out, locally what will work. Is there a way that those local communities and the outlying areas can work together to sustain their communities and their culture? And so that's why we've invested as we have, both in our people resources and our funding to be able to provide that kind of assistance to our rural areas, because we know that it's going to take creativity, innovation, and perseverance, just like growing Kansas did at the beginning, in order to sustain and grow those areas. So we just want to give them the fuel that they need and the assistance that they need to use their own wits and talents to ensure that their area thrives as well as it can.
Well, I think we've got time for a couple more questions, and we've already got those in the queue here, but we appreciate those of you that submitted them. But the first question is back to you again, Governor, and we all know from what we've heard of the new Biden administration that they have some questions and concerns about a lot of our environmental regulations. And it's many times we feel like our straight regulations are suffice. Your role as a Democratic governor with a Democratic administration in DC, your ability to kind of fight for maintaining some of our state regulations over what might be imposed from the federal level.
Yeah, and I understand the importance of that, Rich. We heard a lot during this pandemic, that one size doesn't fit all. And, when it comes to regulations of any sort, I would suggest that is true. And so I will, as I have as a state senator and as governor, I understand the importance of regulation, but I also understand the importance of making sure that we're weighing all the aspects that go into that and all the impacts that regulations can have, and that we think very carefully about that before imposing blanket regulations all across the nation. So again, you can trust that I will use my amplified voice in Washington to ensure that what might be good for California might not be good for Kansas, and I'll make sure that they know that and push them to impose regulations accordingly.
The other question that we have here, and we're going to have this be our final question for this session, but it's resolved around energy. We know that we've got a lot of wind turbines going up around the state, and they create a lot of opportunities for us, but they also come with some challenges. But we also know that we're a big energy state, and in fossil fuels and the production of those, we've heard questions of and concerns about the Keystone Pipeline and what might happen there. So in that transition, where do you see us being able to work within that energy spectrum, Governor?
Well, Rich, I believe in a broad energy portfolio. I think you make a mistake when you put all your eggs in one basket. And so I know wind is growing significantly right now. I think actually Kansas, I believe, is first in percentage of electricity generated by wind. And I think that's a good thing. We know that that's sustainable. That will be with us over time. It is not, it won't deplete. So I think it's wise for us to continue to grow that sector as much as we possibly can. That doesn't mean that I don't recognize that we have other sectors that also contribute to energy production. I know ethanol is important. It's important not only for the energy but it's also important for the business that it provides in our agricultural world. So you can be assured that I've always taken a more comprehensive look at energy issues. I recognize that as where we are right now, we need a variety of sectors contributing to that in order to provide the energy, electricity that we need to operate as a state and to grow as a state.
Thank you again for those comments, Governor. And as we sign off here, we've got a couple of acknowledgments that we might like to make. And one, as we continue this Day at the State House Fireside Chat series, we will continue. The next one will be next Wednesday at 5:30. And our guest will be Senate President Ty Masterson. So those of you get signed back on, and I know you enjoy hearing the senator. But the other one, Governor, is a little bit more of a personal note. And I just had a note passed to me that you have a celebration coming up tomorrow. So we want to wish you well with a birthday tomorrow.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much, Rich. And I happen to know, I saw it on my screen that John Bottenberg told you that, and you'll never forget it.
Well, thank you both for what you've done, and look forward to having conversations with both of you here in the very near future, and appreciate the work that you've done. As well, we appreciate all of you taking time to join us here this afternoon. Look forward to seeing you back on next Wednesday evening. Thank you all, and have a great day.
Thank you, Rich.